wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. I'm so glad to be here for the full 3 hours, 2 hours here in Dallas, and another hour across the nation. Actually, the last 2 hours are nationwide broadcasts. And on Saturday, Vice President Mike Pence spoke to the 2019 graduates from Liberty University. And it was interesting because he issued a warning to these students. He told them that for most of America's history, there was no problem being a Christian, but times have changed. I think we know that. If you listen to Point of View, you certainly do. He continued to tell the graduates that in today's America, to be prepared to be ridiculed and shunned because of their Christian faith. He also said that the loudest voices for tolerance have little tolerance for anything pertaining to biblical teachings. And this is Liberty University, of course, the university that was founded by Jerry Falwell and filled with young Christians, many of whom will be leaders. But they're going to be facing this, and we know it's true, ladies and gentlemen. He said, throughout most of American history, it's been pretty easy to call yourself a Christian. It didn't even occur to people that you might be shunned or ridiculed for defending the teachings of the Bible, but things are different now. And we are going to talk about the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, pro-life speech here in this hour, and what can be done to protect it? Our state government is in session right now. The legislature is there. There's some bills that have come before it. And with us to discuss this is Jonathan Saenz. As usual, he joins us every week during the session. And, of course, he is president of Texas Values. And very interesting. Some of you might not know, but he is a fifth-generation Texan. He grew up in Houston, and he got his law degree at the University of Houston Law Center and his undergrad at UT Austin. So he comes by this activism and concern for this state. Honestly, Jonathan, thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's always great to be a guest.
Well, it's good to have you, and we certainly need an update. And it's getting down to the wire here with the legislature because we're halfway through May. And the session ends on the 31st, so that changes the equation for certain bills. As a matter of fact, some of them have already died, haven't they?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, there's not a lot of time left. And, we had a big deadline last week. House bills had to pass the House by last Thursday at midnight. A couple of things are still alive. I mean, look, if you look at the process until you get to the last minute, there's still a chance to get things done. But your chances of success do decrease with every day and hour that passes as we get to this point in May. And so, but look, a big thing that happened last week was the Save Chick-fil-A bill. This is a religious freedom bill by Matt Krause, House Bill 3172, that did not start to address the Chick-fil-A issue in San Antonio, but kind of got molded in that direction along the way as far as the language got tweaked to be more directed in that direction. But it was a bill about protecting the First Amendment so the government doesn't punish people because of their religious beliefs if they're in business and things of that nature. We've seen a lot of these examples come up. And then kind of in the middle of the legislative session, San Antonio City Council decides they're going to vote to ban Chick-fil-A from opening up a store at the San Antonio airport. That particular airport is controlled by the government, not just locally, but also the federal government. But the city of San Antonio has got some control over the vendors in that airport. And so they banned Chick-fil-A because they read a report from an entity called Think Progress that said Chick-fil-A gave donations to the Salvation Army and Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Horrors.
And San Antonio City Council, acted as if that was such a wrong thing to do because of these Christian entities believe what the Bible says on issues of marriage and sexuality. So, but it had nothing to do with anything that happened in any of the stores. That bill died in the House. The House failed to pass it. And so, look, there was a lot of support going into the Thursday. That was the final day. The bill did come up for a vote, but before Matt Krause, the state representative from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, could ever say anything about the bill, one of the leaders from the LGBT caucus raised a point of order, which is a kind of a procedural complaint about something that may have happened regarding the process side of the bill and not really anything related to the substance. So there was no debate, there was no discussion, there was not a vote. So all of this was really pushed out of the way, and the Speaker of the House ruled he sustained, which is, in other words, he approved the point of order, or he recognized it or said that it had merit. And so that ruling meant that the bill couldn't move forward. Now, if you've got a lot of time left, the bill could go back to committee and
right.
whatever mistake they say was made in the process side, not the substance of the bill, could be corrected. But since there was no time left, there was only a couple of hours left in the night at that point, the bill was effectively dead. Now, there's a Senate companion, but the Senate companion hasn't moved yet, Senate Bill 1978. And so, we're looking at all options right now because this issue has become enormous. We counted dozens of stories written about it over the weekend, state, local, and national. And so a lot of people are very upset. And I think they're unwilling, they don't want to see this issue end, and it shouldn't.
There was a lot of momentum behind this, wasn't there, Jonathan?
Oh, yeah. And you have bipartisan support. You had Republicans and Democrats. There was just a few Democrats, but you still had some. And so there was a lot of people that felt like, this makes a lot of sense. And this isn't about LGBT issues. It's about the government not being able to ban and punish people because they give to Christian charities, or religious charities of any type. And so I think that's something that we should all be able to agree on.
Sure.
And so it was expected this bill was going to pass, but it was never allowed to come up for a vote.
All right, Jonathan, I wonder if first of all, this was the Save Chick-fil-A bill, but it was before that, as you said. It was called the First Amendment Defense Act. It was really an important bill for religious freedom. We need these bills because just me quoting Mike Pence earlier shows us that across the nation we're facing attacks on religious liberty. So this was a great bill. It could have passed. But tell me about the LGBT caucus, because I know that you've already been battling them over these ban the Bible bills. But all of a sudden they were able to come in and do this. Is this due to lack of experience on the part of the new speaker? Or, I don't understand why he backed down.
Well, look, there are a lot of questions being asked and a lot of concern. Julie Johnson is the member of the state legislature, and also she's a member of the LGBT caucus. And I believe she's from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. As a matter of fact, I think this is her first session, and she was elected in the seat against Matt Rinaldi up there in the Carrollton area. And so I don't think a lot of people knew much about her when she was elected. We'll see what constituents will say now. But it seems to be she cares more about making a name for herself and making a name for the LGBT caucus than she does about what constituents want and what's best for Texas. And, look, it seemed to be that there was a lot of discussion about this language getting tweaked in a way that it seemed to be that it was almost agreed to, that a lot of Democrats were supportive of it. And so I think it was somewhat of a surprise that it got attacked this way, or when we started hearing reports that it could be attacked earlier in the week. And so, but that's what it seems like the LGBT caucus wants to do. They want to make a name for themselves. They want to get attention, and they have. They've gotten the headlines, I guess, that they wanted. But, the victim here is religious freedom, and on an issue that I think a lot of people, whether you're on the right or left, think, well, wait a minute, the government shouldn't punish a private business because they gave donations to the Salvation Army. But that's exactly what happened to Chick-fil-A. And if we don't have a bill like this passed, there is no time, that's where things are going to stay.
And we'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
One of the lines that Senator Bernie Sanders uses often in his campaign is his concern that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Since he and other candidates will continue to proclaim this slogan, it's worth taking a moment to critique it. While it is true that the rich are getting richer, it is not true that the poor are getting poorer. Let's put both economic figures on the table for America. In a recent video, John Stossel estimates that the wealth of the richest people doubled over the last 4 decades. But it's also true that poorer Americans got 32% richer during that same period of time. You may have read different statistics, but they're all about the same order of magnitude, so let's assume that they're close to accurate. A good question might be, why worry when some people get richer since poor people are also doing better? Sure, the percentages are different, but shouldn't we applaud the fact that a rising tide floats all boats? And let's look worldwide. In previous commentaries, I have documented the fact that 1 billion people have been raised out of extreme poverty. A corollary to this slogan is the claim being made that there's a lack of income mobility. Certainly, there is some truth to that. Children born to rich parents have a better advantage than children born into poverty, but we're not locked into an economic class. Economists at Harvard University and the University of California at Berkeley found that the richest fifth of Americans fell out of that bracket within 20 years. And those born to the poorest fifth climbed to the highest quintile, sometimes even to the top. Look at the Forbes richest list and you will find self-made billionaires who didn't inherit money. My point is simple. These campaign slogans sound true and reasonable until you look at some of the economic studies. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Well, a little bit later in this hour, we are going to be joined by Ryan Bomberger of the life-affirming organization Radiance Foundation. He has an interesting life story and also a story of, he had his speech. It was a pro-life, pro-human dignity type speech at the University of Texas, Austin. It was interrupted by a smoke bomb. And it sort of brings us into talking about a free speech bill that's also been considered by this legislature. Jonathan Saenz is with me from Texas Values. And Jonathan, you can weigh in on the free speech bill, but first I want to ask you about the Ban the Bible bills. There were several of them, but I know that one of them, HB 517, was shut out of a committee hearing last week. What's going on with that one?
Yeah, look, I think, at this point, the Ban the Bible bills all have no chance of passing as standalone bills. I'll check the Senate. Their calendar's a little bit different on how they do things. You always got to be really paying attention. But as far as from the House side, we don't have any record of any of them moving forward before last week's deadline. That's a good thing. That includes House Bill 517. But you're right. There was a hearing on this bill, and the committee, Public Health Committee, all of a sudden shut the hearing down before it was concluded. I don't know that I've ever seen this at the Capitol. They're really well known for having an open and transparent process, hearings that go on for hours. And there were dozens of people signed up to oppose House Bill 517, which really would make it illegal for Christian counselors to counsel clients if the clients want to talk about the Bible with their children and things of that nature. And so
does this go to that LGBT, the agenda of affirming sexual orientation or your transgender feelings?
So it also related to, if you're a counselor, you had to affirm someone that was gay or transgender, if they said they didn't want to transition, even though we're feeling that way, you could get in trouble for that. This bill would put you in violation of the law for doing that. And so it was very one-sided. And so the other side tried to make it as if that it was some bill that prevents conversion therapy. There's a misunderstanding of a lot of times what's going on in the lives of a young person that's asking questions about their sexuality, and they want to meet with a counselor with their parents to kind of sort through some of it. They should have every right to follow their biblical values and not just, follow the whims of whatever kind of way they're feeling from one moment to the next. And so there was tons of people, well, I'll just say a lot of people that had signed up to testify against the bill. And then I think the chair of the committee only allowed 4 people from each side. I'd never seen that before. I'd seen them limit time per individual, but I'd never seen when people were ready to testify that all of a sudden they would just stop a hearing. And so, but I don't think that bill has any chance of moving forward at this point, House Bill 517. But that's a credit to a lot of our friends and people that got engaged on this issue.
Yeah, it is. And what about the other, weren't there 4 or 5 ban the Bible bills that kind of went to various areas of Christianity or biblical belief and was trying to squelch it and stop people from living out their faith?
That's right. There was one, too, that had criminal penalties. And you could possibly face jail time as a result of getting on the wrong side of somebody's view regarding marriage and sexuality. This is what the government would have been in a position to do. And so we had spent a lot of time this session. These bills were getting a lot of hearings. There's a bill that came over from the Senate, Senate Bill 17, it's a religious freedom bill that has not got a hearing yet, and other bills that people are involved in waiting for hearings. But a lot of these ban the Bible bills, these sexual orientation, gender identity bills got a lot of hearings. And so I think we were effective at stopping them from moving forward, but it did become very time-consuming. But that's a big reason why we're here. In case these things come up, we're there to knock them down.
Yes, and I'm glad that you are there. You have to be vigilant. We have a really responsibility as believers to watch these things, and you just do such a great job. So talk about the Senate right now. I mean, you said the Senate's probably not going to consider the ban the Bible bills. They're dead for now. This is an effort by that LGBT caucus, though, and maybe that's one of the reasons they tried to make a splash on the Chick-fil-A bill, because they didn't succeed or really get anywhere with these ban the Bible bills. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, they do seem very motivated to make a name for themselves, and that it's more about politics and about them getting some notoriety than it is about, just having to work with people during the legislative process. And so that's unfortunate, because I think there was a lot of area where a lot of people on the Save Chick-fil-A issue felt like that was going too far, regardless of what political party they belong to. And that issue's not over. I mean, while, trying to work a standalone bill could be challenging, there are other ways that we can get language on this issue in some form of a bill to the finish line. And so we're looking at all options. There's, the session doesn't end until May 27th. Our staff is 2 blocks away. So we're going to be looking at everything to do it. But in the Senate, I think it's harder for the opposition to get any movement on these issues. You have a stronger majority, and some just the way some of the committees are organized makes it a lot more challenging. And I don't think, I'll check again, but I don't think there's been any ban the Bible bills that have come up for a hearing on the Senate side. So we'll take a look at that. But, moving forward, there's also a couple
Well,
of
keep us posted. I mean, even if it's
What's that?
during the week before next Monday, we need to know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll jump right on it. And there are 2 pro-life bills, though, that are still alive. One is called the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, House Bill 16. The Senate can take action on that, and we expect them to this week, if not first of next week. And then you've got a bill that bans local governments from engaging in these sweetheart deals with Planned Parenthood and abortion providers, Senate Bill 22 that's over in the House that needs to move to the calendar. And so a couple of things still that have a chance, but there's not a lot of time left. But if people go to our action site, txvaluesaction.org, they can stay engaged with us on a regular basis and know what the updates are if they want to take action or if they want to come to the Capitol in person.
Jonathan, one more bill, because we're going to talk about this in the next segment. The Free Speech on College Campuses bill, it was introduced by Briscoe Cain, and it passed the House apparently, and a weaker version passed the Senate. Do you know a lot about that or its future?
Yeah, absolutely. So House Bill 2100 is the bill you're talking about from Briscoe Cain. It's been sent over to the Senate. They have not set it for a hearing yet. So, there's not a lot of time left. I mean, whether that's going to happen, the amount of time and the margin for that is thin. And so, but the other version, Senate Bill 18, is over in the House. It's already passed the Senate. It's passed out of House committee. It's really one step away from getting a vote.
So what
on
does
the
it
full
do?
House floor.
What are these? They're a little different, but what do they do?
This bill just makes it clear whether it relates to viewpoints, religious views, those things, that the government on the college campus can't treat you differently, can't punish people for individual speakers, those kind of things. And so that we've seen come up lately that have been problematic on college campuses. It just really codifies what we've seen in Supreme Court precedent, but makes it very clear in state law that these freedoms exist and that the school and the universities have to respect that.
So many states have these laws already, and Texas needs to sort of catch up with that, right?
No, I think it's absolutely needed. I mean, you talked about that in your lead up. What happened to Ryan Bomberger, my alma mater, University of Texas. We've seen it happen in other campuses and other universities. And so it's really a shame. I saw some of those things happen when I was an undergrad student and a law student.
Did you?
And it seems like, it just seems like you continue to have to find a way to make the law more clear because you have some government bureaucrats or others that try to find a way around following what we expected was already clear in law. And so hopefully this will go a step further so we don't see these things happen again where speech, and a lot of times it's religious conservative speech that's being singled out, will not get banned on these campuses.
Is there a bill I've missed that you want to update everybody on?
Well, I mean, look, there's a number of things moving. There's also a pro-life bill, the Preborn Non-Discrimination Act, Senate Bill 2089, that's moving through the process. And it still has a little bit of ways to go, but it is still alive. And that's one of the pro-life priority bills that we're working on. And it's passed the Senate on second reading, and we're hoping that it'll be headed over to the House soon.
Jonathan, thank you so much for the update, for joining me today. As I said, since things are, coming to the end, we want to keep hearing from you. And I know folks that are engaged with Texas values will be looking for your emails and communications to stay up on these things. So thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us because Ryan Bomberger, who Jonathan and I were just discussing, he's quite an interesting guest. I think you will enjoy him. He's an Emmy award-winning creative professional, and he's just pro-life to his very core. And, in addition to that, he just wants to emphasize that every human life has a purpose and all the intrinsic worth in all of us. And he's funny and he's bold. And he's got an interesting story, which I will let him tell. So stick with us, and we're going to discuss that. And what happened to him at University of Texas dovetails into the need for this college campus free speech bill that Jonathan mentioned. I do want to send you to pointofview.net. Not only is the donate button there, which we always ask you to take advantage of and just help Point of View with our broadcasts and with our ministry. We really depend on the gifts of listeners. But also there's an action item about the Equality Act, which is going to be voted on, I think, in the House of Representatives. This is the U.S. House this week. So go there and weigh in on that one. We'll be right back.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
We mentioned an incident with a smoke bomb at University of Texas, Austin, interrupting a speech. And we now have the gentleman who was speaking that day, not too long ago. Ryan Bomberger is an Emmy Award-winning creative professional. He's also an international public speaker. He's written the book, Not Equal, Civil Rights Gone Wrong. He's the co-founder of the Radiance Foundation. And this is in his words in an article about the smoke bomb at University of Texas. The Radiance Foundation, says Ryan Bomberger, over the past 10 years has launched over 500 billboards in cities across the country, addressed thousands on college campuses, led Capitol Hill briefings, and published hundreds of articles providing context and clarity to culture-shaping issues. Ryan is my guest. Ryan, thank you for joining me.
Hey, it's great to be here with you.
It's good to have you. And I think, first of all, we see your article. We posted it at pointofview.net. But tell us what happened at UT.
Well, UT was supposed to talk about basically the propaganda that people experience all the time when it comes to the issue of abortion. So we had the Young Conservatives of Texas sponsor me, as well as Trotter House, which is a pregnancy center that is actually located right there on campus. And so I was supposed to talk about those issues. In fact, the title of the presentation was a little subtle. It's called Should Have Been Aborted, and challenging the whole worldview that someone with a story like mine should have been aborted. And so maybe 20 minutes into the presentation, all of a sudden you smelled smoke and the alarms go off, and we had to exit the whole building. They evacuated the whole building. And at the time, we didn't really know what was going on. But by the end of the evening, we realized local news, all the local news stations that covered it. My wife back in Virginia and my oldest daughter heard about it, and they were a little terrified by what had happened because they didn't know all the details and didn't know that I was necessarily safe. But this is what happens, sadly, on too many college campuses. When someone doesn't want to hear a perspective that is different than the prevailing one on campus, they try to shut it down.
Ryan, tell us, because it's a little bit intriguing to hear the title of your speech, that you should have been aborted. So before we get back to the UT story, talk about that story.
Well, I'm that fringe example, Penna. I'm that 1% that's used 100% of the time to justify abortion. My birth mom experienced the horror and the violence of rape, yet she chose to be stronger than her circumstances. So she not only gave me the incredible gift of life, she gave me the gift of adoption. So I grew up in a tiny little family of 15. I have 6 brothers and 6 sisters. 10 of us are adopted. You know, we're white, black, Vietnamese, Native American, biracial, just a beautiful mix. And so when people ask me, why are you even in this whole fight? Why do you have a voice? Or why do you think you have a voice? Well, it courses through my veins when I think about being pro-life, and so that title should have been aborted. I am the person with the story that so many say, even pro-lifers even say, well, yeah, I can understand that he or she or it should have been aborted, but yet my value is no less than anyone who is planned. And so I'm grateful to my courageous birth mom, but that's really where my story all began, just the way that I was conceived in violence, but yet we serve a God who enables triumph to rise from tragedy all the time.
So since then, of course, you've spoken all over the nation and even worldwide, and you've started the Radiance Foundation. And what was your goal in doing so?
Well, my wife and I, my wife Bethany, my favorite person on the planet, we started the Radiance Foundation because we wanted to tackle these tough culture-shaping issues. And my wife's an educator by profession. She taught for 13 years in public school and private school, and I was a creative director working in the ad agency world for the same number of years. And we really wanted to tackle these issues that we felt the Christians were not willing to engage in because they didn't know how to talk about them. So we started the Radiance Foundation 10 years ago, actually. This year is our 10th anniversary, because we wanted to creatively illuminate how every human life has purpose. And so that started with billboard campaigns in Atlanta where, I mean, probably the most massive media response to a pro-life billboard campaign. It was our TooManyAborted.com billboard campaign that dealt with the hugely disproportionate impact of abortion in the black community. But there are a number of things that we do, a lot of journalism. We do a lot of live multimedia presentations like the one at UT. And we try to figure out different ways to talk about issues that and with messaging that resonates with different audiences, not just millennials on college campuses, but young folk in middle school and students in high school, as well as older folks who are, 30 plus, even through their 70s and 80s, because we're really trying to debunk so many of these false narratives that are out there, and we're just passionate about illuminating. As parents of 4, and 2 of our kiddos are adopted, we're just passionate about illuminating that every human life has equal and irrevocable worth.
My guest is Ryan Bomberger. And Ryan, has this type of thing that happened to you at UT where your speech was interrupted, and I'm glad that you weren't heard and no one was, but still, things like this should not happen, but has it happened to you before?
Oh, plenty of times. I mean, this is kind of the norm on a college campus. And I should make sure I clarified that we actually got to continue that presentation at UT in another building. So we finished the presentation. So the attempt to smoke bomb us out failed.
Good.
We did get to continue. But no, this has happened multiple times. I mean, Georgia State University, same thing. And we've had protests at University of Louisville. I mean, hundreds of protesters from Planned Parenthood and Black Lives Matter and reproductive justice groups. But this is kind of the norm. Instead of actually sitting and being able to have the opportunity to discuss, especially with the lengthy Q&A that we have, typically Q&A is no shorter than an hour. So there's plenty of time for people to ask the questions. There's plenty of time for them to hear a perspective that I would say probably 99% of the time, maybe 99.9, they don't ever hear on their campuses. But too many students are being taught to fear instead of to think.
So would you say that the administration at UT handled it fairly well or not?
The administration there did say that they want to protect free speech, and so that is, I mean, they say that. It's just the question is what happens when it comes to punishment, which is why we had Trump's recent executive order saying that there would be a punishment for those schools that didn't follow through and protect the speech or to punish those who had prevented that free speech.
Did you ever find out who that was?
At this point, I don't know that that's been discovered yet, but there was a criminal investigation that was ongoing at UT. But this happens. I mean, this is not just secular campus, it's Christian campus. I spoke at Wheaton College back in November, and a little different. They didn't smoke bomb us out, but instead they demonized me to the entire college campus, sending out a university-wide email. They being two administration staff
the administration.
Members. Two employees of the school, as well as 3 student government leaders who trashed my entire presentation, which was called Black Lives Matter in and out of the womb. So they sent a campus-wide email saying my presentation was offensive rhetoric and that it made, quote, this, and I'm not laughing at this, but it's so ridiculous. It made students, staff, and faculty of color feel unheard, underrepresented, and unsafe on campus. Now, for those who don't know, I am brown. I am African American, although I don't like the label, I'm just American. But to say that I made anyone feel unsafe because I presented a biblically based, grace-filled perspective, factual perspective on the issue of abortion's impact on the black community is outrageous. But this is what people do on campuses, whether administration or student activists. They try to shut down conversation. They try to label it hate speech. They try to say that people feel unsafe. And it's tragic because it's keeping people from knowing the truth. And as a Christian, we're the ones who firmly believe that truth sets us free.
Well, after the break, we're going to talk about how the timing of this incident with your speech was actually interesting because also our legislature, which is meeting now and only meets every other year, was considering a free speech on college campus bill. And actually, there's some good chance that will be passed and signed. And so that's great. But I'm really surprised to hear, I think I'm surprised, I think we should be surprised as believers that a Christian college like Wheaton would actually not only not support you, but actually come out in critique of such an important topic, which you were speaking about there.
It's actually a shame. And the thing is, out of those 5 people that penned that letter and released that letter to the entire campus, only one person actually even attended the presentation. And unfortunately, that one individual, which was a student, created all kinds of false narratives about what was said. The beautiful thing is it's all recorded. The presentation's recorded. And
maybe people are interested now.
Yeah, it breaks my heart as someone who just has a passion for people to understand the context to the issues that we're facing and is passionate about bringing clarity to these things, to have those kinds of instances, whether at UT or at Wheaton, just muddy things up so that people won't know. And as a Christian especially, I look at the administration there at Wheaton and see the absolute failure of them and how they handled that entire situation. People can find that out on our website, radiance.life, to find out what exactly happened and all those details. But
let me jump in, Ryan, because we're coming up on a break. I do want to ask you about this generation, the millennial and the Generation Z, and how are they becoming more pro-life, and also about this free speech bill. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I'm Penna Dexter. So glad you're with us today on Point of View. My guest is Ryan Bomberger, and he heads up an organization with his wife, Bethany, called the Radiance Foundation. And Ryan, we hear that the millennial generation and also the perhaps even Gen Z are more pro-life than the baby boomers. Are you seeing that?
Well, that's if you trust polls. I mean, there's so much push polling, which is really deceptive because of the way the questions are asked. But you do see that there is an increase in those who identify as pro-life. And a lot of that is attributed to, this culture of life that's been advanced by groups like Students for Life and Live Action, our friends there, those two amazing groups. And so we are seeing more millennials embrace a pro-life worldview. And part of that is because we're able to circumvent mainstream media that has no interest in telling us the truth about abortion and the context. But I do see that increase. And I work with a lot of incredible, whether they're Gen Z, Gen Y, whatever, millennials who understand these issues. And this for me is the most important part. They are extremely passionate, which is awesome, but they're also incredibly well-informed. And that combination is really powerful. And it's really heartening to see that on not just on college campuses, but in churches and in places across the United States where young people are understanding what it means to be pro-life and dedicating their lives to advancing that culture of life.
Do you think, I know that right now in the news we hear a lot about different legislation, on both sides of this issue, really. The extreme bills of New York, the talk in Virginia about, making a decision about a child who was born alive and this type of thing. So within that area, it's really becoming a hot button issue in the country, perhaps because some people see actually Roe versus Wade threatened. How much emphasis do you place in your organization on getting the right laws passed?
We're not a lobbying organization, but we're all about Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, the two decisions that allowed abortion through the entire pregnancy. The decision a supremely wrong decision by the Supreme Court. We work hard to help overturn that. And, we create messaging specifically for that to happen. I live in Virginia, where Governor Northam was, on WTOP radio talking just so flippantly about basically an act of infanticide. But see, the left is no longer feeling like they have to have filters. They're no longer using so many of the euphemisms. They just feel brazen enough to be as radical as they want to be. And so these measures, like in Texas, HB 2100, reinforcing what already exists, constitutional protection of free speech in the First Amendment. Why we have to pass more laws to protect what already exists as a guaranteed right is beyond me. But I shouldn't say it's beyond me. I understand it. Because the left is going so radical, because they're dismantling constitutional protections one by one, we have to be forever vigilant and I guess go to these steps to ensure that our First Amendment rights, all of our rights, are actually protected.
So, yeah, you were instrumental in getting, actually, it was just maybe a coincidence of timing with this free speech on college campuses bill kind of coinciding, that passage kind of coinciding with your speech. And it kind of makes your point, though, that these are issues that are of free speech that ought to already be sort of widely known in practice, but they're not.
They're not. And I was honored that Representative Briscoe Cain had an opportunity to use the example that happened the night before, on the House floor there in Texas to talk about the need for the passage of that bill. But this kind of extremism is scary. And when you look at some of these polls and surveys of students and their perspective on First Amendment, should it be protected? Should all speech be protected? And it's kind of scary when you see percentages between 20 and 30% of those who think that, certain speech should be curtailed, certain speech should be banned. Well, and we're not talking about obscene speech. We're not talking about directly hateful speech that incites violence, none of that. They're talking about just things that other people find offensive. And so this is the culture that we're in. People don't want to be offended. And most times. They don't be offended by the truth. And so when they're able to label, for instance, pro-life speech as hate speech, well, where do you go from there? And that's the scary sort of thing that's happening here, where people are getting to deem certain speech that they don't like as hateful and therefore unprotected by the First Amendment. But that's the very reason why the First Amendment exists. It exists to protect speech that you don't like.
Okay, well, this is a family radio show station and all of that, but I do want to ask you about what this came up in the news, I think this weekend or even maybe today. You spoke about the left not having a filter sometimes, and this one actress, Alyssa Milano, she's very upset, I think, about all of this legislation passing in various states to maybe heartbeat bills, or Alabama passed a very, very strong pro-life bill. A lot of this will probably be overturned in the courts, but nonetheless, the effort is there. And so she says our reproductive rights are being erased. She's so worried about losing the right to abortion. Until women have legal control over our own bodies, we just cannot risk pregnancy. So join me by not having sex until we get bodily autonomy back. She's calling for a sex strike. And it's so interesting because what she's really doing is making the point that the best way to avoid an unwanted pregnancy is to basically abstain.
Yeah, how about that? See, this is what happens with liberalism. It contradicts itself and doesn't realize, wait, I just affirmed the thing that I wanted to actually destroy. It makes no sense. But then again, she's, it's Hollywood, so a lot of Hollywood doesn't make any sense. I mean, heaven knows God loves us all and wants to see us live whole lives and to come to him, of course. So I say that with understanding that I look at even individuals like Alyssa Milano, that there's always the possibility of redemption. But in her activism, I mean, she's revealing the amount of brokenness that is in her own life, and even the brokenness of her worldview, that she can't even act out as some far left activist and not contradict herself. It's just tragic. This is what's happening. Hollywood feels that they can apply pressure. It's not just Hollywood; it's corporate America too that's applying pressure across from coast to coast. Whether it's gender ideology, LGBT activism, they are trying to assert their power and to make state legislators cower. And I love how the governor of Georgia said, I don't take my cues from Hollywood. I'm not going to let them dictate how I govern the state. And so kudos to him, because there are too many legislators who will capitulate in the face of financial pressure.
And also I think when there's a threat of a lawsuit with regard to some of these bills, I'm really proud of legislators who are very bold and don't really let that stop them either.
Well, I mean, in order to abolish slavery in this country, there were laws that were challenged in court as well. It's going to happen. If the litmus is this law will not possibly be challenged, well, then that's a law that's going to do nothing. So this is going to happen. In the fight to abolish the social injustice of abortion, there will be legal challenges. So let them be. And I'm glad these legislators are like, okay, well, we'll let it go to the court, and we'll keep fighting, and we'll keep going back to the court. Because in the end, it's injustice. Killing human lives, about 1 million a year through abortion, is unjust, it's wrong, it's evil. And so I'm grateful for lawmakers who actually have a spine and will fight this. And this to protect women and their children, born and unborn.
And I'm grateful for the work you're doing, Ryan. Thank you so much for that and for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Penna. I appreciate the conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the next hour, we'll have an open line for a couple of segments, and you can call in 800-351-1212. Did you see this story about Alyssa Milano and her sex strike? You may want to discuss that or any other issues having to do with the sanctity of life. We'll do that after this. Stay with us.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us for Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and I'm so glad to be here in the studio. We have so much to talk about on the program today, and one of the important topics that we will spend the second hour of the program on, of the national program, is really what's going on across the airwaves on television, not just network television, but of course we've got cable and then all the streaming that takes place. And there's a study out called Lewd by Example on TV programming. It shows that 80% of all primetime, quote-unquote, family-friendly comedy shows make explicit, crude, harmful references to sex and in scenes with child actors that are targeted to child audiences. There are other surveys. There's an HBO study on sexual content. A lot of these studies and this research concerns us. And then if you just tune into some of these shows, you'll certainly be concerned. And so we have a lot of information about these programs. There's an organization called the Parents Television Council that collects this. And, the question is, what do we do about it? Well, Tim Winter from the Parents Television Council is going to join me for an hour to talk about what to do. There's a lot that can be done, even by the Department of Justice and the Congress, but also parents and networks and the media. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. You won't want to miss that. Please stay with us for the second hour. But even now, we have much to discuss. We've been unpacking pro-life, sort of the culture of life or the culture of death that exists in this country. And I mentioned, first of all, heartbeat bills and very strong pro-life bills that are being passed across the nation right now. One in Alabama that didn't quite get passed yet, but they're looking at it. And, there's been a lot of controversy over the weekend. These bills are so strong. Are they actually going to jail the mother that has the abortion? No. It's the practitioners of the abortion who would face penalties in the situations where there are penalties in this pro-life legislation. It's a good argument to have. Georgia last week, as we discussed on Friday, passed a heartbeat bill. All of this will be up for grabs because it's going to be challenged because the pro-abortion community sees Roe versus Wade as under threat and under attack. So it's all very interesting. And in the middle of all that, my last guest, Ryan Bomberger, mentioned that the left is losing its filter. Many of the spokespeople don't have one. And it's very interesting to see the statements made by this actress, Melissa Milano, who she fancies herself an activist and a thought leader. She wants to be a thought leader. And she's calling for, she's very concerned that women's reproductive rights, quote unquote, rights of reproduction, it's really reproduction, right not to reproduce, because she sees Roe versus Wade under threat. She sees these bills out there. And she says, until women have legal control over our own bodies, we just cannot risk pregnancy. So join me by not having sex until we get bodily autonomy back. She's calling for this sex strike. And the interesting thing about it is she's making the point that a lot of us have been making for decades, that, first of all, she's inadvertently saying that abstinence is the best policy for preventing pregnancy. How about that? She also calls on pro-abortion women to exercise personal responsibility and self-control, which many of them have said is impossible to do if they don't want to have children. I think by this statement, she admits that abortion is a means of birth control. And she even is exposing, as I said, the reproductive rights phrasing. No one is repealing the right for anyone to reproduce, but these laws are repealing the ability to kill the child that is the product of that reproduction. Have you heard about these comments? If you have a comment on them, you're welcome to give us a call at 800-351-1212. Also, our last guest, Ryan Bomberger, who is really a pro-life sort of spokesperson, and not just pro-life, but pro-human rights, pro-humanity, pro the sanctity of human life. And another person in that category who's young and a leader is Lila Rose. And she, of course, has exposed Planned Parenthood and a lot of their activities. But she has also taught for years that no one should have sex until they're ready to embrace the privilege and responsibility of lifelong commitment and of raising a child. And in a sense, Alyssa Milano's statements sort of back that up. So it's kind of funny. I don't think she realized that's what she was doing when she made these statements. She said, basically, it's just too dangerous to have sex with men nowadays. So she's calling for this strike. You have a comment on that? Give us a call. We would love to hear from you. I also, another story that I think Kirby may have sent me this over the weekend, and he'll be back here. Well, actually, the Millennial Roundtable will be controlling the show tomorrow, and aren't they fun? It will be Nick Pitts and company, and then Kirby will be back on Wednesday. But this article is by Jack Davis, Democrats forced to delete Twitter poll after it backfires. And this is the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee wanting to demonstrate that several months after his bruising confirmation hearings, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh remains an unpopular figure in American legal and political circles. So they posted a Twitter poll asking whether people prefer justices in the mold of Kavanaugh or more like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And, of course, they want to take back the Senate, and they really see the Supreme Court as one of their, they're worried about the direction it's going, and they want to take it back. So they're still taking this poll, but apparently Jack Davis, who wrote about this, says the last time anyone got a chance to see how the poll was going, Kavanaugh had nearly 70%. So people preferred him over Ginsburg. She had about 30%. But guess what? Pretty soon after the results started showing up, the poll was gone. Twitter took it down. Actually, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee took it down. They deleted their poll tweet. Certainly there were some snarky comments. Representative Dan Crenshaw of Texas said, something tells me this probably wasn't the result Democrats were hoping for when they decided to do this poll. So the truth is being told on Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm looking at a screenshot of the poll before it was taken down. And Justice Kavanaugh had 71% and Justice Ginsburg about 30%. And the question was, do you want more Supreme Court justices like Ruth Bader Ginsburg or more justices like Brett Kavanaugh? So, and it's interesting because we are now looking at, over the weekend, I believe, the death of another Supreme Court justice, John Paul Stevens. And he was nominated as a Republican and seen to take the court to the right. And guess what? He was the liberal leader of the court for years. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue with our open line. We'll take your calls at 800-351-1212. Later in the program, we'll discuss the Parents Television Council, what's on TV, and the Electoral College, all of that after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
One of the lines that Senator Bernie Sanders uses often in his campaign is his concern that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Since he and other candidates will continue to proclaim this slogan, it's worth taking a moment to critique it. While it is true that the rich are getting richer, it is not true that the poor are getting poorer. Let's put both economic figures on the table for America. In a recent video, John Stossel estimates that the wealth of the richest people doubled over the last 4 decades. But it's also true that poor Americans got 32% richer during that same period of time. You may have read different statistics, but they're all about the same order of magnitude, so let's assume that they're close to accurate. A good question might be, why worry when some people get richer since poor people are also doing better? Sure, the percentages are different, but shouldn't we applaud the fact that a rising tide floats all boats? And let's look worldwide. In previous commentaries, I have documented the fact that 1 billion people have been raised out of extreme poverty. A corollary to this slogan is the claim being made that there's a lack of income mobility. Certainly, there is some truth to that. Children born to rich parents have a better advantage than children born into poverty, but we're not locked into an economic class. Economists at Harvard University and the University of California at Berkeley found that the richest fifth of Americans fell out of that bracket within 20 years. And those born to the poorest fifth climbed to the highest quintile, sometimes even to the top. Look at the Forbes richest list, and you will find self-made billionaires who didn't inherit money. My point is simple. These campaign slogans sound true and reasonable until you look at some of the economic studies. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and I'm so glad you are with me today. In a little while, we're going to speak with Trent England. He's an expert on the Electoral College, and there have been all kinds of attacks on the Electoral College recently. And, of course, it's usually the party that didn't win the White House that wants to get rid of the Electoral College. And so it's no surprise, but it takes a constitutional amendment to do it, and that's a very tall order. So there's a different route that the left is taking to get rid of the Electoral College or to try to, and it's called the National Popular Vote. And Trent England will explain it. He'll also kind of help us understand why the Electoral College was created by our founders and why it's a good idea to perpetrate and maintain it. Some people say, well, it's not democratic. But we're not a pure democracy, and the reasons why we shouldn't be will also be part of that discussion. So I hope you'll stay with us for that. There's actually an article at pointofview.net about it, and so you can check that out. And also, a little bit later, Tim Winter, president of the Parents Television Council, is going to join me. We're going to talk about the cesspool of television. And, of course, this is so different than back in the 90s and early 2000s when I used to speak with the spokespeople from Parents Television Council about network television and cable, and that was bad enough. But the things that you're seeing, I mean, you can see all kinds of things. Really great programming is available out there for us. But there's a lot that's unbelievably, well, let's just say harmful to kids. And there's no rating system for streaming. So we're going to kind of lay down the problem and talk about some of the solutions with Tim winter a little bit later in the program. I also want to point you to pointofview.net because we have an action item with regard to the Equality Act. I'll talk about a little bit of that in a moment. And then we've been talking about the issues of the sanctity of human life. And so if you have comments on that, you can give us a call, 800-351-1212. Last week, Georgia was the sixth state to sign a fetal heartbeat bill, which means abortion is not allowed after the heartbeat can be heard, which is about 6 weeks. And so those have been passed in several states. Texas was on track to do so. Again, Briscoe Cain, who we've mentioned earlier in the program with regard to another bill, introduced that in the House. It looks like that has died in the House in Texas. And you've had some people say, well, it's going to be challenged in court, so why even stick with it? That's kind of a sad commentary, I think. It was never given a hearing. It died last week. And it had a coalition of over 60 sponsors. One group, the Texas Alliance for Life, said, we are not recommending the Texas legislature support the heartbeat bill and other bills that have little chance of surviving a federal court challenge. I think it's worth fighting for. But anyway, let's go back to the phones, or let's go to the phones. We'll take our first call. David is calling in from California. Hi, David. Thanks for calling.
Oh, hi, Penny. It's kind of a grim day in the economy right now. I don't know if you've seen the crash that's happening. It's about, 700 points, which is pretty darn grim. And, this is obviously a dangerous time, not only for the average person, but for the world in total. I was listening, Kirby did a little editorial during the break there about, the average person is becoming wealthier. But that's, I don't know if you're familiar with the term in economics, time value of money. If you're a little kid, you're given a nickel and you're able to buy a candy bar, as I was when I was a little kid. In fact, we actually still had penny candy. And, you can't, you're lucky to get something for $1 at this point. So if everything has gone up 100 times, then you have to reflect that actual growth. If you could buy a brand new Buick in the late 60s for $2,000 and it's gone up, say 20 times, we're at a position where you have to not look at the numbers, you have to look at the percentages. And it's very dangerous to be pretending that the average person is wealthier. We're only wealthier because there are slaves around the world that are making our shirts and making our shoes. And in a way, I don't much trust Donald Trump. But in a way, he accidentally does the right thing. And there's a point where if you think about America and shoe manufacturing, there isn't a civilization in the world for the last thousands of years that didn't manufacture their own shoes within 40 feet or 100 feet of where people lived. Shoe manufacturing has always
So what
been,
are you advocating bringing all manufacturing back into the U.S.?
Not necessarily all, because, there is an advantage of where the supplies are. Right. You manufacture where the supplies are. But the idea that America has allowed its shoe manufacturing to be exported, there, as I understand it, I think red wing boots, white boots. And I'm trying to think there might be a cowboy boot manufacturer still in America.
That's about it, huh? Hey, listen, David, I appreciate your calling. And certainly, first of all, what's happening in the stock market is of concern. And, there's sort of a game of chicken going on with China right now. And so we're watching that. And, yes, there are arguments to be had about globalization and about, who manufactures what and trade and all of that. It wasn't really our topic today. But I appreciate your bringing all of that up. And these are certainly issues to be watched.
It comes into religion. It comes into religion because people actually think it's the will of God that the economy is one way or another, and it's not.
Okay.
Money.
Hey,
is,
David, I'm going to let you go because I feel like we're kind of traveling all over the map now, and I do appreciate your comments, and it might be more appropriate for a show about the economy. And so, thanks for calling. I really appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the phones are open, and I just didn't want to broaden it out too much since we already have quite a lineup today here on Point of View. And I did want to mention the Equality Act and your ability to weigh in on that because, I think certainly the economy is a moral issue. It's an issue of the heart in many ways. A lot of times government controls us through the economy and through spending and all of those things. So, but there are other ways that it controls us. And there's this attempt right now to basically, for lack of a better term, is just wipe out religious liberty in one fell swoop in this bill. It's called the Equality Act, and we've put a place at pointofview.net where you can weigh in on this because the House is actually going to vote on this. They've already had hearings, and about 100 conservative leaders signed on to a statement on Friday about it, asking the White House to weigh in against it because this is the bill that, it's really several things. It's an attack on women. It's an attack on religious freedom, and it's an attack on really freedom of religion. It would add changes the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the characteristics that are also already covered under that. So it would add those to race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. It would nullify the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It basically undermines the rights of women and girls in that it forces them to share private facilities with anyone claiming to identify as a woman. And then there's the whole issue of sports teams, transgender males competing with women in sports teams. And then there's the issue of counselors being prohibited from helping people that are confused about their gender in a truthful, scientific, biological way. So all of these are part of that. And, it may not pass the Senate, but as I said, it's important to make these efforts. And where you can win, we should. And so we should try our best to get our members of Congress to weigh in and vote against this. You can do it by going to pointofview.net and checking out the Take Action section. It's kind of in the middle as you scroll down, and you can do it very easily. A few clicks, and you've sent a message to your member of Congress. Well, ladies and gentlemen, next up, we are going to be kind of switching gears, talking about elections, and especially this effort to, make an end run, I guess, around the Electoral College. Trent England will join me, so stay with us for that. We'll be right back with more of Point of View.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. So glad you're with us. This comes out of the Daily Signal, which is a publication of the Heritage Foundation. It says Colorado is joining a list of states attempting to overturn the way Americans have selected their presidents for over 2 centuries. This is back at the end of February. The Colorado legislature passed a bill to join an interstate effort called the Interstate Compact to attempt to sidestep the Electoral College system defined by the Constitution. The governor there, Jared Polis, called the Electoral College an undemocratic relic. He vowed to sign the bill into law. And certainly whenever the left loses a presidential election, there is an effort. There's a lot of criticism of the Electoral College as undemocratic, especially if their candidate won the popular vote, but not the electoral vote. And so we go through this periodically, but this time since it's very difficult to amend the Constitution to abolish the Electoral College or do anything else, it's just difficult. There's a sort of a workaround that's being proposed and worked on, and I wanted to ask Trent England to come to the microphones and talk about it because we've talked before with him about the Electoral College. Trent, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Penna. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Trent is Executive Vice President at the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs, and he directs the Save Our States project, which is it's kind of the same topic that we are going to discuss today. He hosts the Trent England Show podcast, and he used to host a Drive Time Radio morning show in Oklahoma City, and he's filled in for various radio hosts, including Ben Shapiro. So that's great, Trent, and it's so good to have you. Can you talk about this effort to sort of get around the Electoral College?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to give folks on the left credit because they read the Constitution, and they came up with a way to, exactly as you said, to basically hijack the Electoral College without ever needing to change the Constitution. And it relies on the fact that the American founders gave states flexibility when they created the Electoral College. The Constitution says each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors, and then it goes on to define all the processes of the Electoral College and limitations and things like that. But legislatures have this power, and we know the founders' intent was to let state legislators figure out how best to represent their states in presidential elections. Most states, 48 states, have just a statewide election, and they cast all of their electoral votes based on winner-take-all from a statewide election. 2 states do it differently, though. Maine and Nebraska do it by congressional district, and that shows this flexibility that states have. But what the left is trying to do, they're saying, well, what if we just get states to pledge to ignore how their own people vote? So Colorado would ignore how Coloradans vote and instead cast all of Colorado's electoral votes for whichever candidate wins the national popular vote, the most votes nationwide. And, this may still be unconstitutional, but it's not entirely clear. Nobody's ever tried to do anything like this before. And, it would have the effect of hijacking the Electoral College system and using it instead of for a state-by-state presidential election, using it for a direct election of the president the way they do in France and Russia. And that's what they're trying to do. And it would take states worth 270 electoral votes for it to go into effect. And that's that magic number. 270 is a majority of electoral votes. So if they get enough states and it goes into effect, they would control the outcome of presidential elections. And they're up to 189 electoral votes. With Colorado, they got up to 189. So they're getting close to 200. Not all that far from what they need to put this scheme into effect.
So the criticism, or one of the criticisms of the Electoral College, is it's not fully democratic, but this is not fully democratic either, this idea of ignoring the votes of people in the states.
Yeah, I mean it's a funny thing that they say, because superficially it sort of sounds right. Well, wouldn't it be more democratic to just throw all the votes in one big pot and count them, and the winner becomes president? I mean, the reality is that's not how many other countries elect their chief executive. In every parliamentary system, they have a prime minister elected by their legislature, their parliament. And that's an even less quote-unquote democratic system than our electoral college. Germany and India both use a kind of electoral college system. In India, they call it an electoral college to elect their president there. A lot of countries that everyone thinks of as democratic have a system like this because as you say, any system is going to have its flaws. And so a national popular vote system, the flaw of that, and the reason why all these other countries avoid that, is that it allows regional candidates to win the presidency. Hillary Clinton was basically a regional candidate. She drew most of her support from big cities, mostly on the coasts of our country. It's the same, the Democrats back in the 19th century after the Civil War were very similar, a regional party. They had intense support from the Deep South. In both cases, the Electoral College said to the Democrats then and to the Democrats now, you've got to do better. You have to build a more nationwide coalition, or you don't get to be president. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's a better democratic process than the alternative.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to weigh in on this, do you think we should switch over and have just a popular vote to choose our president, or do you like the Electoral College? What about this idea of a national popular vote, this interstate compact, where actually it's sort of like outsourcing your electoral votes to the whole nation, where each state would just say, it doesn't matter how our citizens voted, whoever wins the popular vote in the nation gets our votes. That's the idea that's out there, and it's gaining some traction. And also, you can go to pointofview.net and you can check out, there's a spot called Sidestepping the Electoral College. I've posted an article by Jared Stepman of the Heritage Foundation, and it talks about the intellectual dishonesty of this campaign against the Electoral College. And I've got Trent England here talking about it. So if you want to ask Trent a question or weigh in on the Electoral College versus a popular vote, it's 800-351-1212. And as we said, Trent, people are now trying to get around the Electoral College. And, what this does in a sense is it allows, as you said, the big cities, the population centers to elect the president, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Electoral College protects Middle America. It was designed to protect Middle America when the Electoral College didn't allow Al Gore to become president in 2000. The system worked exactly as it was intended to work. The same thing in 2016, and it's interesting to look back over American history and see these different periods of time where you've had. It's happened to be the Democrats, but you've had a party slip into this regional status where they can't win the White House because they don't have broad national support. And one of the really interesting things that in the history of people trying to get rid of the Electoral College, there were a couple attempts to change the Constitution back in the 20th century. One of those in the 1950s. And the big defender of the Electoral College back then, who took the floor of the U.S. Senate and argued kind of like Mr. Smith goes to Washington in favor of the Electoral College, was John F. Kennedy. And it makes perfect sense because the Kennedy family were Democrats because of this system of incentives that the founders created that said to the Democrats back in the 19th century, you know what, just resting on your laurels and all this intense support in the South is not good enough. You got to reach out into northern cities, bring new people, and it happened to be a lot of new Irish Catholic immigrants into the Democratic Party tent. And that's, the Kennedy family became Democrats really because the Electoral College forced the Democrats to reach out to people like that. And John F. Kennedy saved the Electoral College back in the 1950s, and now we've got to save it again.
We've got folks calling in, and we're coming up on a break, so we'll take some calls after the break. And again, the number is 800-351-1212. Trent England is my guest, and there's many things Trent and I could talk about, and I'm going to ask him about the death of Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens after the break too, because I mentioned a little bit earlier that sometimes you don't a president who's nominating judges, Supreme Court or any other court, doesn't exactly get what they think they're getting. And Stevens certainly was expected to take the court to the right. In a sense, he was the first justice to join the court since Roosevelt's time. And it was Gerald Ford who ultimately saw him confirmed. So Nixon was actually the first one to nominate him. But it's just interesting because he ended up being a leader of the liberal bloc of the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's important to look at the judicial philosophy of these folks. And, we've been fighting those battles pretty much ever since. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Trent England is my guest. We're taking your calls, 800-351-1212, and we'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Thanks for sticking with us. I'm Penna Dexter, and my guest is Trent England. Let me mention that in the next hour, Tim Winter, president of the Parents Television Council, will join us, and you won't want to miss it because he's going to have a lot of information about not only network cable television, which is what Parents Television Council was founded to deal with, but now streaming, Netflix, and there's a lot of wonderful programming out there, but there's a lot the parents need to understand is available to kids, and none of it is rated. And so, what are the repercussions of this to the culture, to our kids, and what do we do about it? That will be in the next hour. But Trent England is with me. We're talking about the Electoral College, and let me just take a call from Jonathan in Arkansas. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, how are you doing? I'm in Alaska. But
okay, great. I'm looking. Yeah, that's right. AK. It's not Arkansas. It's Alaska.
Yeah, well, so I just wanted to weigh in because I'm a first-time caller, by the way, and I'm a vet. I was in the Army. I served during 2006, Iraqi freedom, and I just feel like this is a really important issue because nowadays it seems like we're really at a turning point in our country, and I really feel like people should be asking themselves, like, what the question really is, because it seems like there's a reason that people want to get rid of the Electoral College. And if it were really about democracy and that was the case, and I feel like the discussion would be more across the aisle, kind of trying to figure out between maybe the House and the Senate or between people all across the state what could improve the system, rather than just taking a bipartisan or a partisan approach. And it seems to me that the real reason people want to get rid of the Electoral College is because they want the votes to favor the outcome. And I feel like if we do need any kind of solution, we're in a new age now. There are different ways to collect votes. But what about improving the current voting process as it is? Because we already have people that are voting that shouldn't legally be allowed to vote. We have so much problems at the polls as it is. I don't really see how completely abolishing a system that's been around for 200 years is all of a sudden going to fix some kind of divide that seems to exist right now.
Okay, that is a very good point. There's a divide about elections, Trent. I mean, it's not only the Electoral College, it's how do we make elections more secure? And people on the left tend to not want to do that because, they kind of like a situation where you can manipulate the system. I guess the Electoral College or the popular vote perhaps makes the system more ripe for manipulation. And so that's another reason not to go there. But, he's right in a sense. It's not a perfect system, but it's really the best one they could come up with, and it's served us well, hasn't it? I think we just lost Trent. We did. Okay, well, we're going to try to get Trent England back. But, really the topic of the program today is the fact that the left, a lot of states, now we have about 13 states that have voted to join this interstate compact. Colorado is the latest. And in a sense, what they would do is if Colorado supported, say, Donald Trump in the election of 2020, but Hillary or whoever, Bernie Sanders, let's say, gets all the popular votes or most of the popular votes, the majority of the popular votes, then Colorado would, instead of sending its electors or sending their votes to the total, they would just go with the popular vote, the vote of the entire country. And so it would just wipe out the need for the Electoral College eventually. And I think that is the idea of it. And so we want to know what you think. We've lost Trent England, our expert, but I think he's laid out the case very clearly, and that it's something that was devised by our founders. It gives the states rights, even small states, and then it also gives rural America, where it's not as highly populated, its own ability to weigh into the system. And so it does take wisely a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College, and we're pretty sure that's not going to happen. So we're discussing this workaround. Trent, I guess we lost you for a minute. We are taking calls, and I don't even remember the question that was asked, but I think elections are, it's kind of the idea that the left doesn't mind elections being ripe for fraud or manipulation. So I think that's part of this idea of manipulating the Electoral College system. What do you think?
Well, I think that's right, and there's a real concern that moving away from the state-by-state election system would open us up to a different level of fraud in presidential elections, because all of a sudden these, basically one-party states like Illinois and like California could if they weaken their voter integrity laws, and they really already have, then a stolen vote in Los Angeles for the first time ever would cancel out a vote in Texas or a vote in Oklahoma, and yet, because of the way our election laws work, because all of our elections at this point are state level elections, there's no power for a person in Texas to say, I'm worried about how Los Angeles is running elections, and I want my elected officials to do something about it. Texas elected officials have no power over California. And so I worry that we would see more fraud in the short term under a national popular vote system. And in the long run, I think Washington, D.C. would end up taking a lot more power over elections, because even conservatives would say, we want somebody who can actually police this system and make sure it's honest. And once you have a national election, the only place you can get that is at the national government, which is in Washington, D.C. And I think a lot of us, we don't want presidential appointees running presidential elections. So there's a whole chain of bad things that could follow from moving away from the Electoral College.
Let's go to South Carolina. Hugh is waiting there. Hugh, what is your question?
You have pointed out, Penna, that we are not a true democracy. Isn't it correct to say that we are not a democracy, we're a republic, and that factors into this issue about the popular vote, that our leaders chose to establish a republic with representative government, not popular control. And so some of the questions or issues about popularity are in some sense moot if we accept the fact that we're a republic and not a democracy.
Trent, we've got about a minute.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail right on the head. There's two different ideas about what government is for. Some people think government is just, the popular will, putting force behind the popular will, and other people actually believe in right and wrong. And if you believe in right and wrong, then you hold government to a higher standard. And that's the whole idea of a republic, is about holding government, even we the people, our government, to a higher moral standard. The Electoral College is a part of that system.
Trent, we didn't get to talk about John Paul Stevens. Maybe next time. Thank you so much for, as always, bringing common sense to this issue and for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Penna.
Ladies and gentlemen, next up, as I mentioned, we will be joined by Tim Winter from the Parents Television Council. Call your friends if you're parents or grandparents. I think you're going to learn some things that you don't already know. We know that we have things to worry about, but what are those things and what can be done about it? Let me also point you to pointofview.net. There you can find information about all of our guests, also the articles that go with each one of these topics. And I did put one up there about the Electoral College from the Heritage Foundation, from Daily Signal, that you will get a lot of information from. A couple of studies from Parents Television Council are up there that will help you to understand what's going on in the culture. And in the next interview, I think it'll give you some backup. So go there. The donate button is also there, and we will be right back.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm so glad you're with us. And if you're parents or grandparents, there's this sort of 800-pound gorilla in the culture that is so powerful. We're all aware of it. And I noticed some articles about the harm of screens to our young people last week in the media. And, you know, that includes videos and smartphones and online games and all of that. And even the World Health Organization is talking about this and trying to make some guidelines for parents. But even with all of this, there are studies out there that tell us that television is by far the medium in which kids and really all Americans spend more time than the other screens. And so that's why this organization that we are going to discuss during the next hour, the Parents Television Council, is so important. They have been around a long time, but their work is more important than ever today. They're based in Los Angeles. And with me is the president of the Parents Television Council. He is Tim Winter, and he spent 15 years with NBC, the National Broadcasting Company. He served in various management capacities there. And he also participated in the creation of MSNBC, which, as you know, is the cable and online news joint venture with Microsoft. He worked at MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and he led the studio's interactive division. And he is now with the Parents Television Council and leading that organization that does so much good work. He resides in L.A., which is good that they're there. And Tim, thank you so much for joining me.
Penna, good day to you and your listeners from Hollywood.
Well, thank you. And we're glad you are there and we are here. And we are so appreciate the work of Parents Television Council. I actually grew up in L.A., so I know what it's like there and how beautiful it is. But I also know there are many challenges and things emanating from that hub. And, you know, I know that Parents Television Council has done so much good work over the years, and certainly monitoring the major networks, monitoring the cable shows. But now we have this whole other part of television, and it's the streaming factor that is, it seems like it's impossible to get our arms around it in a sense. There's a lot of good content out there that we parents want for our children, but there's so much that parents, I think it's very difficult for parents to get their arms around it.
Boy, you're exactly right, and thank you for the lovely introduction that my mother probably wrote for you. But you know, it is challenging today being a parent or a grandparent when we think about the impact of media on children. I don't think there's been a tougher time to be a parent or a grandparent when it comes to trying to regulate and manage the media consumption of your children. You have more than just, when I grew up, the television set in the family room, you know, and I was the remote control.
Right.
So my parents would tell me to change the channel. And now you have video games, streaming technologies that deliver videos to children, whether they're at home, at school, on the school bus, anywhere, at their friend's house. The internet, you know, Netflix and Hulu and these other streaming media platforms. It is a Pandora's box for parents. When you open this box, you allow a lot of wonderful child-appropriate content to come into their world. But along with it comes an even greater volume of toxic content that that as parents we try to do everything we can to shield them from.
And one of the things you're great at, and it's because I think a lot of Christian parents or parents who are raising their children in, traditional morality, they tend to just get so overwhelmed that they ban television altogether or send their kids to other people's house where they'll watch it anyway and things like that. So it becomes important to have information, and I think that an organization that people can trust to help them. And so when I started going through some of what was out there and that you have exposed, I was even shocked. And I've been looking at this for decades, but there's a program, and I'm sure you can describe it because you probably do this all the time without being too, I guess, explicit, but it's called Sex Education. And I think some parents might think that this is, a documentary that's going to help my children understand, the birds and the bees. But what is it?
It's the exact opposite of helping. And the show is on the streaming platform called Netflix, and millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans have Netflix. A lot of parents believe that Netflix is safer than basic cable or premium cable because they feel they can regulate the viewing a little bit easier for their child. But it is a show that is marketed by Netflix as a teen drama. In fact, it is, I would say borderline pornographic, but I would probably put the borderline or in air quotes, not the pornographic part in air quotes. I mean, it really pushes the envelope, the explicit nature and the nudity and so forth. The themes, the content of the show is anything but helpful. I think it is one of parents' worst nightmare to suggest that here's a show that normalizes the type of conduct that most families do everything in their power to avoid leading their children to. And you talked about families living, trying to bring their children up with Christian values. This is a television show that does quite the opposite, yet it's marketed by Netflix as a teen drama.
So it's under the parent's nose, it's in your home, and, it was hard enough with all the ratings that we have for network TV and cable, but the streaming shows aren't rated, are they?
Well, I think most parents are well aware of the Motion Picture Association ratings guidelines. Most families, most parents rely on that rating system, PG, PG-13, R, and so forth. Many parents are also aware that there's a TV rating system. The difference is that the TV networks rate their own programming. They decide themselves what the programming is on their networks. There's a financial incentive for them to be inaccurate, for them to allow younger children in under a false moniker of being child appropriate. When you have video games that have their own rating system, rap music and other explicit music that has explicit lyrics has a rating system for their content, and the different streaming systems, whether it's Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu, some of them use the TV ratings, some of them use the motion picture ratings, some of them use both, some of them use neither.
It sounds like a confusing mess.
It is a confusing mess, and the problem is the system is very unreliable. It always errs in one direction, and the one direction is that it always allows younger children in, not keeping younger children out with the age rating. And so it really is a confusing system that we're trying very hard through our public policy efforts in Washington, D.C. to improve.
We're going to talk a little bit about that after the break. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Winter, president of the Parents Television Council, is with me. We have another disturbing aspect of this that we will discuss after the break. There's a show called 13 Reasons Why. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but some of the repercussions of 2 seasons of that show have been studied, and it's scary. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
One of the lines that Senator Bernie Sanders uses often in his campaign is his concern that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Since he and other candidates will continue to proclaim this slogan, it's worth taking a moment to critique it. While it is true that the rich are getting richer, it is not true that the poor are getting poorer. Let's put both economic figures on the table for America. In a recent video, John Stossel estimates that the wealth of the richest people doubled over the last 4 decades. But it's also true that poorer Americans got 32% richer during that same period of time. You may have read different statistics, but they're all about the same order of magnitude, so let's assume that they're close to accurate. A good question might be, why worry when some people get richer since poor people are also doing better? Sure, the percentages are different, but shouldn't we applaud the fact that a rising tide floats all boats? And let's look worldwide. In previous commentaries, I have documented the fact that 1 billion people have been raised out of extreme poverty. A corollary to this slogan is the claim being made that there's a lack of income mobility. Certainly there is some truth to that. Children born to rich parents have a better advantage than children born into poverty, but we're not locked into an economic class. Economists at Harvard University and the University of California at Berkeley found that the richest fifth of Americans fell out of that bracket within 20 years. And those born to the poorest fifth climbed to the highest quintile, sometimes even to the top. Look at the Forbes richest list and you will find self-made billionaires who didn't inherit money. My point is simple. These campaign slogans sound true and reasonable until you look at some of the economic studies. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
My guest is Tim Winter. He is the president of the Parents Television Council. We are talking about what's out there on television, and in particular right now, Netflix and the streaming organizations. And, you know, we've talked about the idea that ratings for TV has just not been that effective. And so what do we do? Well, I know one thing Parents Television Council does is tremendous amount of research. They rely on their own research and research of other organizations, and this is a key tool to begin to solve this problem, isn't it, Tim?
Oh, it sure is. I mean, the most important protection for a child when it comes to age-inappropriate material is an involved parent. And it's a tough job, especially here in the 21st century when you have so many different types of media platforms that are targeting children with the information. But an informed parent is the first and last line of defense. We certainly are working on every other element we can, talking to the advertisers, talking to the networks, talking to the creators, getting the regulatory agencies that have some oversight to do their job. But the most important aspect is a well-informed parent making sure that their children are consuming healthy entertainment just as they want their children to consume healthy food.
So how do we warn parents?
Well, the most important thing we can do is get information in their hands so they can make these more informed decisions. The Parents Television Council has a research staff. We record and monitor all of primetime broadcast television. We try to note every instance of graphic sex, violence, profanity, sexualization of children and women, every advertiser of every show. And we put all this information into a database that we can hopefully share with parents in a way that
that helps them to make more informed choices. Certain parents may have different values within their own homes as far as what content is most concerning to them. Some folks are more concerned about the violence. Some parents are more concerned about the profanity. Some more about the sexual content. Some are concerned about all of it, and rightly so, because the science backs a parent's instinct that this material can be harmful to a child. So we tried to provide, with a simple red, yellow, green traffic light, each show on primetime television. Here's red, yellow, green for sex, for violence, for profanity, and an overall content rating.
Well, I mean, that's great, but what about streaming? Do you have any creative ideas to implement? Because I can imagine that part of your research shows some of the effects of shows like this on kids.
Oh, yeah. When we talk about streaming, it's unfortunately streaming is such a huge, there's such a vast quantity of it out there and so many different platforms. We can't monitor even a fraction of it really effectively. But what we do know is that there are shows that are targeted especially to children, to teenagers, to impressionable children, going through a tough period of their lives. I think all of us can harken back to our years as teens and remember the struggles, the learning that goes on, and how we're trying to come to terms with who we are and where we're going. And increasingly, some of these shows on streaming platforms like Netflix are targeting children with horrendous content that is having tragic real life consequences.
Well, before the break, I mentioned one of those, and this one I know that you are. You're right now in the process of making this just one of your, I guess, projects, because 13 Reasons Why is a show that glorifies suicide. And in its first 2 seasons, not only did you try to get it pulled, but you tried to publicize the idea that this could actually encourage teen suicide. And then a study came out that showed that is exactly what's happening, correct?
Oh, exactly right. And to each and every person who is listening to our conversation today, I ask you to remember the name of this show, 13 Reasons Why. And please, if you have kids or grandkids, talk with them about this. Please share this information with your friends who share your values. 13 Reasons Why is a show that is marketed and targeted at children who are in high school and in junior high school. Most adults have never even heard of a show called 13 Reasons Why, but I assure you, if most children who are in junior high school and high school have heard of it, and most have watched it, unbeknownst to their parents. It is a show that romanticizes suicide. A young high school girl raped and bullied in high school, and she kills herself. It is the most graphic, explicit suicide scene we've ever seen produced in any form of media. And the show is basically 13 reasons why she took her own life. And it's basically videos she sends to her friends showing basically as revenge. It's revenge suicide for the way she was treated. And when the show was released, the Google search term for how do I kill myself went up 26%. We were very troubled by this. We called on the company to pull it off the shelf. They refused. And now just last week, the National Institutes of Health, one of the most premier health foundations in the world, has linked the release of this show to an increase in children actually killing themselves, ages 10 to 17, a spike of 30%. Children who have killed themselves after
a 30% increase.
Yes,
in child suicide.
After the release of this program, yes.
So the program has had 2 full seasons.
2 full seasons thus far. They say there's going to be a third, but we are calling for. I mean, what responsible corporation, a publicly traded corporation, with a board of directors and all the responsibilities that go along with it, is allowing a product that they're putting into the stream of commerce that is linked to children committing suicide, and they still are pushing back on any efforts to have it taken off the shelf until the evidence can be proven that it's safe for children. What other product in the stream of commerce is linked to children killing themselves, and yet we say, well, it's okay for it still to be out there on the shelves? It's very disturbing, and we're doing everything we can to hold Netflix accountable publicly for this.
When you think about kids watching something like this, their minds are just immature, and in a sense, it sort of appeals to either their sense of revenge, or it sort of glamorizes suicide. Make a statement this way, and so targeting something like this to kids seems to be borderline, immoral, but even should be illegal. I mean, are there any things being done with regard to alerting authorities to this program?
Indeed, there are controlling legal authorities, the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. These are government agencies that oversee the enforcement of laws and making sure that that products, unhealthy, harmful products, aren't marketed publicly. So we do have an endeavor there to get members of the public to speak up and speak out to those government authorities who they're not elected, they're appointed, but they are ultimately accountable to the public. They're supposed to serve the public's interest, and that's what we want them to do. If a product is linked to children killing themselves, how can we allow that product to continue on the shelves? There is this outreach that has just now begun with those authorities.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question of Tim Winter of the Parents Television Council, you can give us a call at 800-351-1212. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you have any shows you want to mention that you think are particularly concerning, we'd like to hear about that. And just any concerns or ideas that you have with regard to this issue. And we've also posted some articles, one by Tim Winter back from August of 2018. Netflix turned its back on American families, sort of a comprehensive piece about this new challenge that comes from streaming television and what Parents Television Council is doing about it. And then this whole, you can go to also the Parents Television Council website. You can get there by just going to pointofview.net. You can see Tim Winter's picture there, and you can click through to the website. There's a lot of information there for you, and they're really a tool. You are a tool, aren't you, Tim, for parents and families and media and others?
That's why we're here. I think when we look at the national polls on the issue, most parents, regardless of their faith, their geographic location, their political beliefs, most parents believe that the entertainment media culture today is harmful to children, especially, and there has to be somebody out there as a watchdog, and that's what we are here for. We try to channel the voices of Americans into one large choir where we can speak up, speak out, and really have a positive impact on our media culture.
Refreshing, ladies and gentlemen. Give us a call, 800-351-1212, if you have a question or comment for Tim Winter of Parents Television Council. Also at pointofview.net, there are articles, and you can certainly click through to the website and find out more about this great organization doing so much good that I think we as parents and grandparents and friends of parents and grandparents need to know about and spread the word. So we'll be right back. Stay with us for more of Point of View.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
We are taking your calls at 800-351-1212. We are speaking with Tim Winter, president of the Parents Television Council, and shocking programming on Netflix, 13 Reasons Why. I'm shocked about it. I didn't even know about it until Parents Television Council brought it to my attention. And this show glorifies teen suicide. The third season is ready to go, and it's been linked to a spike in Google searches about how to commit suicide. In fact, in the month after, I think the first or second season, I can't remember, it was studied, and I can't even believe this. Suicides by children ages 10 to 17 increased 28%. It's just, it's hard to get your arms around. Tim, I'm going to take a call. I've got a caller who wants to talk about this very issue. So let's go to Michael in California. Hi, Michael.
How you doing there?
Thank you for calling.
Not a problem. I do not condone suicide, that movie, in any way. I do. What I did do was, my wife and I, we watched it with our boys, and I wanted, our youngest boy is suicidal, and I wanted him to see the feelings that other people feel when they do that, you know what I'm saying? And I know, it's completely wrong or whatever, but I don't know, I didn't know how to, say, oh yeah, this is how this person feels or whatever, you know what I'm saying? I just know that was a way for him to see my other boys.
How did he react?
Too.
How did your son react?
He was like in awe, or, and kind of like, yeah, more aware, like, oh my gosh, yeah, what you're saying is kind of right,
So,
and,
I mean, just as a father, I'm curious, and then I'll go back to Tim, but how did you feel? Did you feel that was a positive thing to do? Do you feel you did the right thing by watching it together?
I feel, yeah, because kind of like in the movies, in the 2 seasons, whatever, we paused it or whatever, and kind of we did talk about stuff, and I'm not saying that cured him, but I know my oldest son committed suicide, and he, there wasn't a note for me to read, all it was I got a call and this is what happened. So
I'm so sorry.
So I'm just, and RJ and Christian was the son that did that, but RJ, they were kind of close. They shared the same birthday, and so they were close, and now RJ is kind of suicidal, and we're dealing with that kind of.
Wow.
And
Michael, I appreciate your calling and sharing this story. It's very painful, and I hope and pray that you're perhaps getting some outside help also for your son RJ. And Tim, the winner of Parents Television Council, what about the idea of watching a show like this or any of these shows and discussing it as a family?
Yeah, Michael, just know my heart goes out to you and to your family for what you've had to experience. Yeah. And when we began our conversation a short while ago, Penna, you talked about the importance. We talked about the importance of parents being involved with the media consumption of their children, and I think what Michael is showing us a great example of really understanding and helping to navigate the media consumption of their children. There was positive and negative research that came out of 13 Reasons Why. The positive research was that those children who watched the show felt more empathy for children in their peer group who were being bullied, more awareness of sexual assault, more awareness of the danger of those who are at risk of committing suicide.
Right.
So those are all positive
Right.
things. What sadly, the number of children who watch this show with a parent is extremely small. There was also research done in November of 2018, just about 6 months ago, by the University of Michigan, and they found that the children who were at risk felt that this show, when they watched it unattended, without their parents, it pushed them over the edge. There was a small percentage who watched with a family member, with a parent, and I think that the results were much more positive. But when you have a show that is so, I think, irresponsibly being marketed to children, unbeknownst to parents, that's where we have a problem. That's where we have our greatest concern. Most parents have never, ever heard of this show, but I assure you most children have, and many watch.
Yeah.
Michael, again, thank you for calling and sharing it. And I think it resonates that most parents aren't like you. You're the exception rather than the rule. But I think our listeners will be praying for you because you've dealt with suicide of one son, and so we're going to be praying for you and your other son. And Jim, have you gone to like Netflix and talked about this show? I mean, it just seems like the leadership could be appealed to on the basis of this isn't about somebody's religion or anything. This is about life and death.
Yeah, we've reached out to the CEO a number of times. We have received confirmations that our letters were received there at his office. And even last year, just coming up on a year, it was in June of last year, their annual shareholder meeting. We asked a question at the annual shareholder meeting that he actually addressed. He actually addressed a question about how can you defend the decision to renew a show that has been linked with the deaths of young children. And he said, look, it's a popular show and nobody has to watch it if they don't want to. And well, of course that's true, but I think it's very callous. It's a very callous response.
It's naive.
If you're going to, yeah, absolutely. So one thing that with Michael's story, with the academic, the scientific research that we've seen, both about the Google search terms, about the children who have taken their own lives after watching the show, the impact of positive and negative research conducted by Michigan and Northwestern University, what we know unequivocally is that the show is having a tangible impact on children. And for a corporation to hide behind our cherished right of free speech, our First Amendment right to free speech in this nation, to hide behind our right to free speech and knowingly market a show that is linked to this type of behavior, I think is just so wildly irresponsible. We're not saying that they don't have a legal right to produce this. We're not saying that there's less than zero chance that this might be used as a positive tool for parents such as Michael. But the way it's being marketed, the way it's being distributed is grossly irresponsible.
It really is. Listen, I've got another Michael calling in from Ohio about the show, but since we're closer to a break, I'm going to wait until after the break. So, Michael, hold on because we want to hear from you. We want to hear your question and your comment. There's one other topic too, Tim, I want to bring up, and you can start answering, and that is, we've all seen, even with network TV or with movies, this idea of cleaning it up and just taking out bad words and things like that. And is that idea still floating around out there? And what are Netflix and other companies saying about that?
Oh, there is a wonderful company out there with a wonderful service that allows parents to actually watch programs on Netflix, and they can decide for themselves in their home. They can say, I want to watch this movie, but I don't want F words. I don't want nudity. I don't want bloody gun violence. You can set filtering controls on your own personal device, and when you watch the movie, it just skips past those offending scenes. You can watch mainstream Hollywood movies that just quickly skip past any type of content that you decide that is inappropriate. This service is called VidAngel, VID, VidAngel. And I'm personally aware and acquainted with the executive team. I've visited their headquarters, and this is a family-run business. They are trying to help parents enjoy entertainment free of the very explicit type of stuff that most families are concerned about, but it's based upon each family's own values in terms of what is or is not filtered out.
Well, it sounds great. I'm sure there's some creatives who dispute that, but we'll talk about that a little bit after the break and continue to take your calls. 800-351-1212. Tim Winter is with me. And again, you can go to pointofview.net. You will find a lot of information there, including our donate button, which we ask you make use of, and also some articles, one by Tim Winter and others, pictures and bios of all of our guests today. So go there during the break. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to the final segment of today's Point of View. I have posted at pointofview.net an article from thehill.com from May 8th. And Tim, we talked, this is Tim Winter, Parents Television Council, on the line with me. And we discussed earlier in our interview the sort of broken content rating system. And the FCC, apparently, at your urging, is going to be studying that, aren't they?
They sure are. We actually helped Congress insert language into the bill that funded the federal government that required the FCC to look to see if the content rating system, the age-based content rating system, is truly serving its purpose of protecting children, and to make sure that its oversight is properly being administered. Right now, we see all sorts of fraud and deception that go along with that rating system, and we want it to be accountable to the public and to serve families, not serve Hollywood by hiding behind a rating system that encourages parents to consume shows that have graphic sex, violence, and profanity that are age inappropriate, even though the age rating suggests it is appropriate for a child.
It's supposed to shed light, but it seems like, in a sense, it's keeping people in the dark.
It is a veil that parents, sadly, are being tricked into thinking that this stuff is appropriate for children. It's not, and unfortunately, there's no accountability. We hope that the FCC will report back to the Congress here this week with their final report saying, here's what we recommend.
Well, we will look forward to finding out about that. And, you know, this show, 13 Reasons Why, glorifying suicide among teens, has struck a chord here, Tim. And let's go now to Michael calling in from Ohio. Michael, thank you for calling.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for taking my call.
What is your story?
Well, 2 years ago on May 31st, my son, amongst all the stuff he was going through at the time, took his own life. 2 years this May 31st. I had four children. He's my oldest, 17. He was, and my second oldest found him. And I have two others that are 11 and 9 now, and we're all broken up kind of in family-wise. But I know for a fact he was watching the show shortly after or right before he did what he did, and amongst everything he was dealing with, I believe it was linked to, I would link it to his driving him over the edge, making it easier for him to do what he did. And I just want to know, I tried getting into something where I could, I wanted to be a part of somebody trying to drive this off the air, but it didn't really go very far after it, they wanted their second season on, and it just didn't seem to go
What did
very
you
far.
do? Did you contact Netflix?
Yes.
Yeah.
It didn't really go anywhere from there. I think I was online with something. I signed up for something online and did a suicide walk and things like that, and it didn't really seem to go anywhere.
Yeah,
and
it sounds so callous in a sense, the mindset there. Tim, can you speak to that?
Oh, I'm going to try to. I'm a little bit choked up here. Michael, I'm so sorry what you went through, and the other Michael. It's why we're here. This is why we're here as an organization. When you look at what parents instinctively know to be true about how media impacts their children, the medical science, the academic science confirms this. There are over 1,000 research reports out there going back 50 years that show that the content that children consume in entertainment media has an impact on their cognitive development and on their foundational system, their belief system. When it comes to violent media, even Harvard University found that the relationship between what a child consumes in media and how they behave is stronger. The link is stronger than secondhand smoke and cancer. It's stronger than condom non-use and HIV transmission. It's stronger than lead paint ingestion and IQ. It's stronger than those three things that we base public policy on. And yet, there are people out there. I don't believe, I've worked, as Penna was so kind to introduce me, my entertainment media background. I worked in Los Angeles and Hollywood for more than 30 years, and I don't know a single person who wakes up in the morning thinking, how can I hurt children? How can I put children over the edge? They think that they're trying to tell a story in a powerful way that's based on their life experiences and the way they want to tell a story. But there is but extreme disregard for the impact that that entertainment media can have on children. We are amping up our pressure on Netflix, and Michael, I hope that we can communicate directly to see how we might be able to help you reach the executives so that they hear your voice. I would promise you personally to be able to, if I can do that, I will do everything I can to help you in that regard. It is deeply troubling that on this wonderful radio program today, we've had 2 phone calls come in, both of whom fathers who have lost their children. And we're not saying that it was only because of one TV show, but we know that this one TV show has a powerful impact, and we have to do something about it.
I knew he was watching it, and I stopped and started watching it just to see what he was seeing, and after I saw it, I couldn't believe how easy they made it look. And the problem with it was that they also, I mean, how many kids go through what she went through in their high school career and don't do that? I mean, even my wife now. Yeah, there's no. I mean, I called it when I saw what the school did for my son after like a candlelight vigil, I called it 200 Reasons Why Not, because there were over 200 kids that were standing there telling how great a kid he was. And why couldn't they do it something like that where, something telling why not to do it instead of 13 reasons why she did do it.
Hey, Michael, I want to, before the show ends, I want to ask you to stay on the line so that our producer, Steve, can get all your contact information, and we'll get it to Tim Winter so you guys can have a discussion. Because, I mean, thank you so much for being bold to call us and speak about this, because you can be you can be helpful to Parents Television Council. And in many of these thorny problems, it's numbers, it's people getting together, banding together to try to make a difference. And so I think you can be very helpful there. So please hold on, and I'll let Steve go back to you. And Tim, I want to get back to you because we just have a minute before the end of the show. I want to thank you so much for your work at Parents Television Council over the years. Thank you for joining me today so that we could, and I hope this is the first of many shows, because it just keeps coming. And we need to keep people informed is one way to do it, of the many ways that you have. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Penna, we're so grateful for this opportunity, and you please call on me anytime. We are here, and the work has never been more important, especially with so many different media platforms targeting our kids today. We're here for parents, and please come alongside our organization.
Yes,
and,
sir.
And help us.
I think we've made that case about things just mushrooming and getting more difficult to monitor. So this organization, Parents Television Council, is very important. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great evening.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your healthcare. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian